Friday the 13th. For most people, it's just a superstition, but for the Knights Templar, it was the beginning of the end. At sunrise on Friday, October 13th, 1307, hundreds of heavily armed soldiers stormed into Templar strongholds across France. The king had given one order: arrest them all. These were not ordinary monks. These men were warriors, bankers, assassins to some, heroes to others. For nearly 200 years, the Knights Templar had become one of the most feared and powerful organizations on Earth. They fought in brutal holy wars, guarded priceless treasures, built a financial empire, and allegedly uncovered secrets powerful enough to threaten kings and the church itself. But then, they vanished. Their leaders were tortured, burned alive, their wealth disappeared, and their legacy became one of history's greatest mysteries. So who were the Knights Templar really? And what actually destroyed them? This is the complete rise and fall of the Knights Templar. To understand the Knights Templar, you first need to understand how brutal the medieval world really was. The year is 1095. Europe is poor, violent, and deeply religious. Most people never travel farther than a few miles from where they were born. Disease is everywhere, war is constant, and Christianity dominates almost every aspect of life. Then came a speech that changed history forever. Pope Urban II stood before thousands and called for a holy war. The goal? Take Jerusalem from Muslim control. And just like that, the Crusades began. Thousands of knights, peasants, and mercenaries marched across continents toward the Holy Land. Many died from starvation before they even reached battle. Others were slaughtered. But against all odds, Jerusalem fell in 1099. The Crusaders had won, at least temporarily. But victory created a new problem. Christian pilgrims from Europe now wanted to visit Jerusalem, and the roads leading there were basically death traps. Bandits, raiders, murderers, travelers were getting robbed and butchered constantly. That chaos would create one of the most legendary organizations in history. Around the year 1119, a French knight named Hugues de Payens came up with an idea that sounded insane. What if monks became warriors? At the time, monks were supposed to live peaceful religious lives. Killing people was considered deeply sinful. But the Crusades changed everything. Hugues and 8 other knights created a new military order dedicated to protecting Christian pilgrims in the Holy Land. They called themselves the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon. Not exactly catchy, so history shortened it to the Knights Templar. They were given headquarters on Jerusalem's Temple Mount, which many believed was built over the ruins of Solomon's Temple. That location would later fuel centuries of conspiracy theories. At first, the Templars were poor, like genuinely poor. Their famous symbol, 2 knights riding 1 horse, represented their lack of money, but they had something more important: purpose. These men took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. No wives, no luxury, no personal wealth. Every Templar lived for God and war. And unlike most medieval soldiers, they were disciplined, extremely disciplined. That made them terrifying on the battlefield. The Templars quickly earned a reputation that bordered on legendary. Imagine seeing this as an enemy soldier. Hundreds of armored knights charging directly at you without fear of death. These men believed dying in battle guaranteed salvation. That mindset made them incredibly dangerous. Templar Knights became elite shock troops during the Crusades. They fought in some of the most brutal battles of the medieval era, and their reputations spread across Europe. Soon, kings and nobles started donating massive amounts of land and money to the order. The Pope even gave them extraordinary privileges. The Templars answered to no king, no local laws, only the Pope himself. That level of independence was almost unheard of. They became a state within a state, and with wealth pouring in, the poor knights were no longer poor, not even close. By the mid-1100s, the Templars owned castles, farms, ports, vineyards, and entire fleets of ships across Europe and the Middle East. They had become an international superpower. But surprisingly, their greatest weapon wasn't the sword, it was banking. The Knights Templar accidentally created something revolutionary: a medieval banking system. Here's how it worked. Let's say you were a wealthy pilgrim traveling from France to Jerusalem. Carrying gold across thousands of miles was basically asking to get robbed. So instead, you could deposit your money with the Templars in Europe. They'd give you a coded document. Then, once you reached the Holy Land, you could withdraw your money from another Templar fortress. In other words, the Templars invented an early version of modern banking, and people trusted them. Why? Because they were seen as holy men, warrior monks protected by the church itself. Soon, kings were borrowing money from them. The Templars became bankers to Europe's elite. And with money came influence. Massive influence. They built gigantic fortresses across the Holy Land. Some of them looked nearly impossible to conquer. At their peak, the Templars operated like a multinational corporation mixed with a military empire. But power creates enemies, especially when kings owe you money. While the Templars were growing richer, the crusader states were becoming weaker. Muslim forces began regrouping under powerful leaders. One name terrified the Crusaders more than any other: Saladin. In 1187, Saladin crushed Crusader forces at the Battle of Hattin. Thousands died and Jerusalem was lost once again. For the Templars, this was catastrophic. They continued fighting for another century, but momentum had shifted. One by one, Crusader strongholds fell. The Templars kept fighting anyway, even when defeat looked inevitable. That stubbornness became part of their legend. Many Templars preferred death over surrender. But by 1291, the final major Crusader city, Acre, collapsed. The Christian presence in the Holy Land was effectively over, and suddenly, the Templars had a problem, a massive one. Their entire purpose had disappeared. No Holy Land, no pilgrims to protect, no clear mission. Yet they still possessed enormous wealth, military power, and political influence. That made people nervous, especially one man, King Philip IV of France. King Philip IV was deeply in debt, and guess who he owed money to? The Knights Templar. Philip was ambitious, ruthless, and desperate for control. He had already clashed with the Pope before. Now he saw an opportunity: destroy the Templars, erase his debts, and seize their wealth. But attacking a holy military order directly would outrage Europe. So Philip needed something stronger: accusations, horrifying accusations. He claimed the Templars practiced secret initiation rituals, that they denied Christ, spit on crosses, worshipped idols, committed acts of heresy. Whether any of it was true remains heavily debated to this day. Many historians believe the charges were fabricated. But in medieval Europe, being accused of heresy was basically a death sentence. Then came Friday, October 13th, 1307. Philip launched a coordinated raid across France. Hundreds of Templars were arrested simultaneously, including their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay. Under torture, many confessed, because torture in the Middle Ages was horrific. People confessed to impossible things just to make the pain stop. And once those confessions spread, the Templars' reputation collapsed. The Pope initially hesitated, but pressure from King Philip became overwhelming. Eventually, the Church dissolved the Knights Templar in 1312. Their lands were seized, their members imprisoned or absorbed into other military orders. But the most dramatic moment came 2 years later. March 18th, 1314. Jacques de Molay, the last Grand Master of the Templars, was brought to Paris. He was expected to remain silent. Instead, he publicly declared the Templars innocent. King Philip reacted immediately. De Molay was sentenced to death. That same evening, he was burned alive on an island in the Seine River. Legend says that before dying, Jacques de Molay cursed both the king and the Pope, calling them to God's judgment within a year. And strangely enough, both men died shortly afterward, which only fueled the myths surrounding the Templars even more. But here's the thing: even after the order officially disappeared, the stories never did. What happened to the Templars' treasure? No one knows for sure. Some believe their gold vanished before the arrests. Others claim they discovered ancient secrets beneath Solomon's temple. Over the centuries, people connected the Templars to the Holy Grail. Secret societies, the Freemasons, hidden treasure, even modern conspiracies about shadow organizations controlling the world. Most of these theories lack solid evidence, but the mystery itself keeps the legend alive. And honestly, that's part of what makes the Knights Templar so fascinating. They existed at the perfect intersection of history and myth, warrior monks, elite fighters, religious fanatics, bankers, martyrs, maybe victims of corruption, maybe something far more complicated. Either way, their story still captures people's imagination over 700 years later. The Knights Templar began as 9 men trying to protect pilgrims on dangerous roads. They became one of the most powerful organizations on Earth. Then they were hunted, tortured, and erased by the very powers they once served. But despite every execution, every burned document, every destroyed fortress, the Templars never truly disappeared. Because legends are harder to kill than people, and few legends in history are bigger than the Knights Templar. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, subscribe for more videos on empires, wars, mysteries, and forgotten civilizations. And comment below, do you think the Templars were innocent? Or were they hiding something?